Washington State, along with several of the Nordic countries, have become hotbeds of innovation for emission-free aviation. And we have a real who's who of that industry that's going to speak now. And to present, we have another one of our COVID sufferers, unfortunately, Lisa Stiffler from GeekWire, who came down with it the other day and is going to moderate remotely. So give them a warm reception. Okay, I was thinking about breaking for lunch now, but then we...
Tee up the urgency and pathways for cutting carbon emissions worldwide. And of course, we're focusing on aviation, which is contributing around 3% of overall emissions. And I would like to introduce our panel. We have Niklas Lund, a director at Rockton, a Swedish company that's moved from leasing aircraft to commercial airlines and is now investing in clean aviation. It's raising a sustainable aviation fund that could total 200 million euros, or about $210 million. We also have with us Chris Cooper, who is the vice president of North America for Neste. The company launched many decades ago as Finland's petroleum producer, but started exploring biofuels in the 1990s and is now the world's largest producer of sustainable aviation fuels. We have with us Sami Lahdensuo, I'm sure he'll correct me later, the Vice President for Government and Institutional Relations at Finnair. The airline has the goal of cutting its net emissions in half by 2025 compared to 2019 levels, and by reaching net zero by 2045. And we have Heiða, here we go, Guðbrandsdóttir. She is the Deputy Chief Operating Officer at Icelandair. The airline has a near-term goal of cutting its operational emissions in half by 2030 compared to 2019 levels and reaching net zero by 2050. Again, welcome to all of my panel, and thank you so much for traveling here today. And I'd like to just jump in. I know we're running a little bit late. So I was hoping to start with the technologies that we're going to be using to get us to net zero emissions. And Chris, with Neste as being in this space the longest, perhaps you can kick us off by telling us about the approach that your company is taking.
Yes, Lisa Kitos. Thank you all very much. It's a pleasure to be with you. Hopefully we'll have a lively session that will provide you information about how you all arrived here for the event and maybe how you're going home. But air travel is critical to all of us. However, we represent a minority. The minority of us are able to extend this wonderful luxury in our lives of air travel, to be able to get to know the world and to get to know wonderful places and do business worldwide. But this industry represents a greenhouse gas emissions of about 2 to 3%. That doesn't sound like a lot, except there's only a few of us that are using this method of transportation. And so Neste had taken advantage of an opportunity many, many years ago, and 15 years ago it converted conventional assets. Those assets were refineries that were using fossil fuel to produce the energy that we use for air travel. Air travel requires a special liquid fuel to burn in turbine engines. The neat opportunity is that they stuck with it. They worked to develop policy. They worked to develop the environment that allowed SAF, or sustainable aviation fuel, to be accepted worldwide. Today, this product is accepted. It's distributed by Neste through conventional means. So we're using large cargo vessels as we distribute the product into airports as close as San Francisco International Airport, Los Angeles, Helsinki, Amsterdam, Munich, Frankfurt. These are airports worldwide that are giving airlines the ability to engage SAF and provide the solution that their customers need. SAF, in its neat form, reduces greenhouse gas emissions on its life cycle by 80%. This product gives us the ability to continue expanding the use of air travel. This is an industry that intends to double in the next decade. It's an industry that needs to find solutions. We found great solutions in the road transportation. We can put batteries in cars now. We can put batteries into heavy road transportation, but we don't have the extension cords long enough to fly an aircraft back and forth through the Nordics to an event as great as this. So we'll have to use what's available today. Our product's made from only wastes and residues, so used cooking oils, animal fats, and we're able to produce that in a refinery. So a former refinery we were able to convert that was able to bring this product to market. Now Neste represents 80% of the world's production. We made recent investments in the United States around the feedstock, but you may be aware that we've invested in a refinery in the San Francisco Bay Area, where a local refinery here to this market, Marathon Petroleum, we now have a joint venture. That will allow us to continue our expansion of renewable diesel and eventually a sustainable aviation fuel. But assets exist in these markets today. Neste in Finland made the conversion of its Porvoo refinery, but the Cherry Hill or the Anacortes refineries locally can find their way to this conversion, and the feedstocks are available, and we can find our way to a greener future in aviation.
It's great. Thanks so much, Chris. I want to give Niklas a chance to speak to this as well. You're looking at emerging next generation solutions. I'm wondering, have you made any investments yet? And what technologies are you excited about?
No, we haven't made, we made an investment in another leg we have, which is climate change mitigation, where we invested in an aerial firefighter. But in the new technology sector, we're looking at most companies, I would say. What you're looking for there is, the electrification. So you'll have, the full electric, which is fully battery powered with electrical motors, or you then have the hybrid electric, where you combine the batteries with another power source, which could be a conventional jet turbine and or hydrogen combined with a fuel cell. For our purpose, we're most interested in the hybrid electric solution because it gives you more payload and range. The reality is today that the energy density of batteries are not really where you need it to be. You can fly very few, a small payload, a short range, but that's really not what's needed. So you have to scale it up somewhat. But we'll see this develop over time. We're fairly optimistic about the energy density. It will develop. We'll get, end of this decade, will definitely be 2 or 3 times better than today, which will make it more reasonable to have maybe a 50-seat aircraft that can go like 600 kilometers, something like that. So that's also, and the other part of it is also that the benefit is that the direct operating cost is falling fairly dramatically if you go that way for 2 reasons: no fuel in whatever form it is, and also the maintenance of these aircraft is going to be much lower because conventional jet turbine engines are fairly complicated and needs a lot of maintenance, while it operates at over 800 degrees. A electrical motor, it's got 1 moving part, operates about between 80 and 120 degrees, so it's lasts forever. So that's actually a good driver. Once you have that, you will have airlines running for it because they obviously want to drive down their operating direct cost.
That's great. So Sami and Heiða, you've heard the pitches for some sustainable aviation fuels, for electric and fuel cell hybrid. What are your airlines doing? How are you making some inroads into the sustainable space? Maybe start with Heiða?
Yeah, maybe I can.
Sami, sure.
Thank you, Lisa. Also, can you hear me? Thank you for having me. I'm Finnair in the discussion. First, I think I have to make a reference to what Pekka was speaking in the previous panel. There was a lot of references to nerds and Finnish nerds as a kind of introvert guys. And just for future reference, there's a way to make a distinction between introvert and extrovert Finns. So when you're having a discussion with an introvert Finn, he's looking at his feet. But when you're having a discussion with an extrovert Finn, he's looking at your feet. So keep that in mind. So that's the way. No, it's thanks for Chris and Niklas for those opening remarks. And in that sense, I think that we are right away jumping to the core of the issue, because when we are looking at the emission reduction in aviation, let's say by 2050, when we are out 2045 and Finnair is aiming to be net zero, the core of the discussion really is on sustainable aviation fuels. I mean, there are other measures and ways that we can also go towards the emission reduction, but SAF, sustainable aviation fuels, whether it's biofuels or whether it's kind of electrified synthetic fuels, that really is the key. But the challenge there is it's twofold. It's the availability of SAF and its price. And this is the airlines talking. I think that Heiða will agree with me on this. I was just recently in Brussels, and we had a meeting and a public meeting where also the CEO of Lufthansa Group, Carsten Spohr, was participating. And he just said that they had just calculated that if they, Lufthansa Group, which is the biggest airline in Europe, if they had all the SAF in the world available right now, it would last for 3 days, and then it will be all finished. So it's a challenge really for all of us, is how to scale up the production and availability of SAF, which is also a political question as well, and it's a question of capital. I'm sure we will come back to that as well. And when it comes to price, we have a good collaboration with Neste and some other producers as well. Here we can face one challenge, which is that the aviation is a global business. So if you look at the SAF policies, for example, between the United States and the EU, the policies are totally different. So when we are operating in the EU area, the SAF price is 3 or 4 times more than the traditional kerosene jet fuel, basically. But when you go to California, where you have a lot of tax credits and different kind of incentives in place, which is not the case in the EU, the SAF price can be only like 10% more expensive than traditional jet fuel. So there's a huge difference between the two. So it's a kind of divergence between different regions in the world that we have to be able to overcome and find ways to create joint policies that treat all the airlines in the same way.
Heiða?
Yes, thank you. I have to begin with, it's important that aviation has united on a common goal for 2050. So aviation is going for net zero by 2050. And this is important because it creates a level playing field. We're all headed in the same direction. And it's also of note to mention the different pathways that aviation has in order to achieve a reduction in emissions. So you have new technology, and what does new technology mean for aviation? Basically, it's realized through fleet renewal. And fleet renewal is something that is a very strategic decision for an airline, probably the biggest decision an airline makes. Secondly, you have operational efficiencies. And this is something that is in the DNA of airlines. We're always looking for means to reduce our fuel burn, our emissions. And then thirdly, SAFs, or sustainable aviation fuels, and as a last factor, offsetting. But here today, maybe focusing mostly on technology and SAF, I think it's also important to differentiate what we can do today and what is maybe further into the future. And looking at these 4 measures that I've just described, the 2 that will have the biggest impact are new technology and SAF, and they are also probably the furthest from us at the moment. We can always go further into operational efficiencies, but the big wins will come through these 2 pathways. And as an example, the net zero by 2050 goal is carried by SAF by 2/3 of the goal. So it's a very important measure to achieve. Also looking into the sort of different applications in aviation, it's tempting to look at the different flying distances, because at the beginning, especially looking at the energy transition, the challenge will be to develop range. And if we look into new technology, domestic aviation has the potential to be decarbonized, perhaps even in the next 5 years or so. So in Iceland and at Icelandair, my company, we have established collaborations with 2 different companies. First, a Swedish company called Heart Aerospace, who are designing an fully electric aircraft, a 19-seater, that could revolutionize, the domestic network. You could serve smaller markets, and you referred to the lower operating costs that are very important. But also we're partnering with a US-based company called Universal Hydrogen that are developing hydrogen fuel cells that will eventually also, within 5 years or so, decarbonize domestic aviation. But if we look at the longer range aircraft, the cross-Atlantic flying, then we have to rely on SAF. So I agree with your point on we need to build the demand and increase the supply in order to meet these goals, because energy transition in terms of this kind of flights is further away, 15, 20 years at least, I would say.
That's exciting. I mean, it really is inspiring to hear that some of these technologies are scaling up and becoming increasingly available. And I want to transition into asking a little bit about the sort of carrots and sticks that will help us get there faster. There's so many different players involved in pushing this along, whether it's government regulations, industrial alliances and goals, venture capital, tax breaks, what the customers and the shareholders are asking for. I'd like to hear how those factors are helping and hurting progress. Maybe, well, we can start with the airlines again, or go to Chris or Niklas.
Yeah, I can go.
Sure.
No, I mean, and a lot of capital is needed. There's no doubt about that to develop. So, I mean, from our point of view, there are a couple of things that's necessary to develop the electrification, but it's also to come up with additional or new technologies for producing SAF that drives down the cost. Because, as you heard, 2/3 for long haul is going to be SAF, but at the price range it is today, somebody has to pay that, and I don't think any of us wants to pay, twice plus for the tickets if we can avoid it. So hopefully, we're going to see new technologies, maybe on the power to liquid side, where you can maybe produce green hydrogen cheaper and do the process that actually take green hydrogen to synthetic fuel. So definitely capital. In the EU, we definitely see that in the EU taxonomy and the EU Green Deal, there's definitely intent to skew the market towards sustainability. I mean, there's at least if you talk to EU, there's definitely going to be a fuel tax. Carbon emission is going to cost. There's no doubt about that. I think we're probably going to see carrots also, like for sustainable aircraft, going to get lower parking fees, lower navigation charges, and so forth. So I can't speak for what's happening in the US, but Europe is definitely skewing the market towards anything sustainable. There's going to be ratios of how much SAF you have to drop in at airports and so forth. So capital, honestly, I think that the aviation industry itself has to provide a lot of that capital, because this is a longer play. It's not the traditional digital world when you invest and maybe you can get an exit in 4 years. To develop an aircraft takes a long time. It takes a very long time. And I think a lot of these new technologies need to be tested and all that. So there is capital needed. And in Europe, there's some capital provided, but I think the industry, together with the financial, traditional venture capital and so forth, needs also to come in. Because we at least see that there is a great opportunity in the exit side, because if you have a aircraft platform which works, for example, the existing OEMs who are, in my opinion, maybe not doing too much, they will have to buy it, because otherwise, they will not survive long term. So, and it takes, you can't just reverse engineer it. That takes too long time.
Yeah. So Lisa, to answer your question a little bit further, I've kind of explained to the audience, so SAF is a available solution. It drops into conventional resources, so there is no additional capital required for its deployment. There's conversion opportunities at refining level. Tank level could be converted, as we did in California, from a conventional a fossil fuel tank that was polluting the environment, emitting greenhouse gases, to the introduction of SAF. When we use the question of the audience of how many of you want to be able to fly worldwide and be able to reduce your emissions while doing it, I would assume that you would all agree. So we have two candidates on the panel today that need to hear from you, and they need to know that you're cooperating with them and helping them. The idea of carrots and sticks, I would tell you, not in this equation. All of the solutions are going to be required, but what we misinterpret is the stick. And what we're referring to is to move a beast of burden, you can either offer them a carrot or you can whack them with a stick. We may assume by definition that the stick in this case is a mandate. But what does a mandate really propose an environment that the minority of our populations use? What it provides is the opportunity for investment, assurances for capital to move into this space. And the fastest way to reduce the cost of sustainable aviation fuel will be to allow mandates to drive the expansion of production, provide the incentive that those who have the technology or will one day develop the technology have an incentive, have a reason why they can participate with the airlines. This isn't an all or none, or it's not an us against them. It's all of us together. We have a brilliant program with Finnair, and in which we actually provide their customers the ability to purchase SAF. Neste, their number one customer, purchases our SAF and delivers it to them for their operation. An exciting opportunity that we were able to expand and then bring in BCG and other consulting groups who do a massive amount of air travel within this region. They were able to purchase the SAF, and together with Finnair, we were able to put SAF on their aircraft at zero cost to Finnair, but directly reducing their emission reductions as a result of their operations. So there's a synergy if we all work together. But when we call it us against them or carrots and sticks, Lisa, we're missing the opportunity that SAF is available today and we can all participate in it.
Maybe if I can take it from there, already Nate, just to respond briefly, and in a way, your core analysis, of course, I agree with, basically, as you know. But as I said, I mean, this is also a question of policies. It's a question of regulation. It's a global question. So we have different kind of regulatory processes taking place in different parts of the world, which is once again coming back to the issue of price of sustainable aviation fuel. So as I said, in Europe, we have to pay 3 or 4 times more, 3 or 4 times the price of kerosene. In the US, it's much lower and the availability is low. Then we have, it's a global competition. Some of the biggest airlines in the world are operating from the Middle East, you know, from Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Doha, you name it, basically. And they might have different forms of subsidies in their operations as well. And then we have China, and then we have other Asian countries, etc., that have different systems. So as an airline, in order to retain your competitiveness, in order to retain the connectivity of your country, of your region with the rest of the world, you just have to tackle and find a balance with the question of price. So when the price of SAF is 3 or 4 times more than the jet fuel, having a blending mandate, which is kind of forcing the airlines to, you know, tank this up to a certain extent for your flights at the moment, that's not the solution. We have to be more smart than that, more strategic, and look at the global picture.
Heiða, are you jumping in there?
Yeah. Good point, Sami. I want to also stress that when we're looking at this issue, we also always have to address it in a global manner. The solutions that we're presenting, they have to be safe, they have to be sustainable, but they also have to be economically viable or commercially sustainable, if you would. So looking at the full system is always going to be a driving factor. I believe that innovation will be the key to this, and we heard yesterday the Icelandic Minister Lilja Alfreðsdóttir referred to incentivizing innovation, and I think that is also something that has to happen in this field. We need to break some technological barriers in order to upscale faster. And for instance, in the case of SAF, moving to power to liquid, where we have the potential of reaching 100% of the ratio between captured CO2 and emitted. So, and that also brings me to, because we've been talking about the Nordics and Iceland, and what we are also looking for is some of the uniqueness of the geographical position that Iceland could bring and the renewable energy sources. So, for instance, for Iceland, looking at this, this development globally, the possibility of being a producer of SAF, e-fuels in the future, is a very exciting option as well. And looking at the scale of things, a relatively small pilot could, for instance, really move the needle looking at Icelandic aviation. So I think that taking a look at strategic locations and taking the sort of shortest path to new technology will also be a key factor moving forward.
That's wonderful. Thank you. I want to insert a little bit of Seattle flavor into this since the event is being held in my fair city. In looking at some of the local companies here and their role in this space as well, looking at Amazon has made sustainable aviation fuel purchases. They're in the process of buying their own planes for deliveries. Microsoft has been investing in some venture capital into some SAF ventures. They're also paying for the sustainable aviation fuels for flights between Seattle and San Francisco. Boeing is building more efficient planes. I know Icelandair is a customer. Do you have any thoughts on the roles that some of these companies are playing in kind of moving the needle towards more sustainability? And anyone who wants to jump in there, since it's a little bit of a wild ball.
I can try briefly. Again, they're all customers of Neste, and it's pretty exciting. Neste was the first and only to sign the Amazon, or what we attribute as their climate pledge. And what we were able to do with them is continue to grow through telling our story and working throughout the markets. And they've encouraged other airlines to join. But Amazon is currently, through their aircraft and those third-party aircraft they use, a large consumer of SAF and customer of Neste. We're going to continue to expand that globally as we work with Amazon. But what we find is that the partners that are working with the airlines, as imagine the Microsofts, the Googles, they are putting passengers on board these aircraft. And they've been participating, and so they participate with the airline. And so together with Neste, our airline partners are able to help facilitate the delivery of SAF to the consumer who wants to purchase it. So whether it's on par with conventional jet fuel pricing or two times more expensive, their consumers, in this case, the Seattle market, are buying product that's not specifically in the market today, but it is within reasonable proximity. What we're very excited about is that the state is working diligently on developing and the finishing of its low carbon fuel standard. That will go a long way to accompany the federal standards that are available today. What we need to remember is that SAF is a new technology. Socialism is a terrible word in the United States, certainly in this area. However, we need to realize that for 100 years we've been subsidizing fossil fuel companies to distribute their products. We've given them tax incentives, development, and technological advances in R&D. That's called socialism. What I'm hoping we learn from this is that there's an opportunity in Seattle to expedite the learning of what's been done in California, realizing that renewable road transportation in California is basically paying for our ability to participate in the aviation space. We need the Washington to address it in a manner that provides us with equality across these products. Gives the airlines the ability to participate with us, who will be our primary and almost exclusive source of distribution. And so the airlines can participate with the state, its legislature, and then the community begins to be able to participate in this and purchase SAF as it's available. But I would tell you, thumbs up for the community. The corporate space has done a very good job, from Starbucks to Amazon to Google. Again, all of them have done terrific. So yeah, applaud them, please, because they've done a great job.
Maybe just one small comment. I mean, because many of those companies are dealing with the behavior of people. I don't know, they might have the ability to have some sort of technical solutions as well. But when it comes to kind of directing the people the behavior of people and customers, I think they have a big role there. And also as an example of that, for example, Google now, when you're going there and trying to find ticket prices, airline ticket prices from one place to another, and you have a lot of these online travel agents, when all of us, we have done those comparisons, then now that you're using Google, they can actually give you the order in the order of the emissions that those airlines are doing during those flights. So I think it's a very important thing actually that when the customer does that comparison, this is actually coming up first, that you can see, okay, this is the route I'm going to take, this is the airline I'm going to take, and this is the effect of that. So this kind of a very simple behavior-related matters are also very important.
Yeah, I also believe that this will always be a combination, accumulation of all means available to us, and so the message that we are receiving from our passengers always, of course, matters dearly to us. We are, of course, moving forward on the sustainability journey, and I believe that what aviation really needs now is a green revolution of technology. And what's interesting, we've talked about history here today, and looking back, learning from history, leaning into the future. And if we look at past revolutions, they have all been driven by huge technological advancements. Doing things better, faster, more efficiently at scale. Regarding the future of aviation, sustainable aviation, we're sort of at the brink. We're not quite there yet, and we need the push to get there. The push will come from many different directions. It will come from passengers, it will come from different companies, and it will come from government policy. And I believe now that it is very important that the government plays this role by incentivizing the research, the development, in order to get us past this brink and really take off into the future.
Wonderful. I know that we are running a little late on time, and so I want to maybe just look ahead with some optimism, I hope. I mean, we've clearly heard that there are a lot of challenges in this space, but reasons to be hopeful. Maybe if each one of you could share one thing, when you wake up at 2 in the morning, anxious about what's happening with our planet, that reassures you somewhat in the aviation space that there's positive, aggressive movement taking place. Is there kind of one thing each of you could kind of point to that is reassuring to you?
I think in general, I sometimes have to remind myself that the time from the Wright brothers' first flight until we had supersonic flights was 44 years. So that tells us that it can be done, basically.
We've got to move faster than that, though.
Yeah,
right?
But the starting point when the Wright brothers, there were no industry, right? Today we have a big industry. There's a lot of stakeholders in it, so it shouldn't take 44 years. But I'll give you some optimism on let's say, with the environmental or sustainability aspect of aviation is very much focused on the greenhouse gas emissions. There's another part, because the emissions at high altitude creates other problems. And for example, on contrails, which by the academics and science world is assumed or calculated to be, has as much of a climate impact as all the emissions from the aviation. That is something now which is worked on, and we're looking at it and hope to engage in it, that you can now, with new real-time satellite images, reroute. So, and by just it's been a big study on this now. So you will reroute, and that would be about 1% more fuel cost. But then you will basically be able to cut that with about 80%. So that's an enormous impact. It's just that contrails hasn't been an issue that has come up. But it's just a question of time when that suddenly gets the attention again. So that's something that can go fairly cheaply, quickly, and will have an enormous impact in terms of sustainability for aviation.
That's great. At first, I was a little worried you were taking us into a dark place, but that piece has a solution potentially is really exciting. All right, others want to jump in?
Sure, I'll finish. What's really exciting is, again, knowing Neste's, our purpose, and that is to make a healthier planet for our children. What we're finding is that the going it alone is quickly finding pace with our peers. We donated Kaisa Heikkinen joining one of the largest, or the world's largest oil company on their board, and quickly we're seeing changes. We're reading about Marathon joining Neste as our joint venture company, Phillips 66, Chevron. We're finding others realizing that they're not making decisions as specific and only for shareholder return, but consumer drive. They realize there is no shareholder return if they do not begin to think of the future. The future is tremendously bright. We have a lot of great technologies that will come. McKinsey released recently a report that describes these technologies, and although they incrementally are more expensive as we expand, even to the extent of power to liquids, which is probably 10 to 15 times the cost of SAF, what we realize is there is momentum. And as we all work together and we work with the airlines, we work with the technology providers, the solutions are available. As we think more together rather than independently, we can change the minds of those that are in authority to help us. We don't know the effect immediately as to the ecology and how the planet will change in the short term. We assume it will be the same. But if we wait for a future technology, we may miss the opportunity to have a bright future, to provide the world that we want for our children. But again, this is an opportunity that we're all doing together. So I'll give you the phone number of your congressman or senator after this so that we can reach them together. And we can explain to them that we need their help and that they can help us with policies that will bring this about even faster. But we can't claim that it's an airline problem. This isn't an airline problem. This is a transportation proposition. We must look at it that way and more holistically find solutions. And they really are everything. The really neat thing is, as well as it took us a little while to get to supersonic, we grounded those aircraft, and we don't fly inefficient aircraft. We fly more efficient aircraft. We act more efficiently. And by doing that together, we're going to see a bright future. And I'm very excited to be part of that with Neste.
Yeah. Maybe just to say, I have great points by Christian and Niklas. And just to say that I'm also very optimistic. All the greatest changes in the history of humankind have always been taking place when we have to make changes. And there's a lot of things, as we have heard, a lot of things are, bubbling under at the moment and happening. But we just have to make choices, and we have to find ways to collaborate, in a more efficient way. And I fully believe that is going to happen because we have to. There's no choice. We have to be carbon neutral, and that is the way we are going to. And then maybe another small concrete thing about being optimistic and positive is that, when it comes to aviation and flying, at the end of the day, it's all about the duration and the duration of your flight when you're flying from one point to another point, and then it comes back to issues such as route planning. And just as a positive note, so if you're planning to fly to Helsinki from Seattle, there will be a new route opening from Seattle as of 1st of June to Helsinki, which will be, I guess, the shortest route between Seattle and Helsinki and the rest of the Nordics. So welcome on board, in addition to Icelandair's excellent offering.
That's with a Boeing aircraft too, so that's very exciting.
Yeah, maybe lastly, just chipping in, what really gets me excited about sustainability is the technological advancement, the innovation that we're going to see. Okay, we've talked about the net zero by 2050, but then what? What about true zero? What about truly decarbonizing aviation? And I'm really excited by the projects I mentioned earlier, decarbonizing the domestic sector, because I believe in the learnings that you can derive from getting to new technology, testing it out, seeing how it works with infrastructure, all the operational landscape. And I truly believe that there is technology that we have yet to discover that will accelerate us on this path even further.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much to all of you for
it's
coming
going to
to
be
our
in a panel
city.
that is competing with lunch, but it's okay, you know.
And thank you for tolerating my giant head over all of this session. I really appreciate being able to participate remotely. It's just been a pleasure and an honor, and thank you all so much.
Thank you, Lisa.
Lisa.
Thank you, Lisa. And